The email landed with the sterile thud of a guillotine. It was from HR, of course. Subject: Employment Status Update. There was no warmth, no preamble, just a calendar invite for a video call in 10 minutes with a woman I'd never met, and my regional manager, a man whose entire personality was a collection of corporate-approved polo shirts. My name is Clara, and if you've ever bought a $16 latte that came with a lecture on sustainable bean sourcing, you might know the company that just fired me. Let's call them Aura Coffee. They sell themselves as an ethical alternative, a place where every cup supports a global family. I was just fired for trying to make sure the family members who actually frothed the milk could afford their rent. The call itself was a blur of practiced jargon, restructuring, not a cultural fit, exploring new directions. They never used the word fired. They never used the word union. They just spoke in the smooth, frictionless language of corporate cowardice, designed to be legally airtight and morally bankrupt. I didn't say much. I just watched the regional manager, Todd, stare at a point somewhere over my shoulder on his screen, his face a mask of uncomfortable neutrality. He was a foot soldier, and this was his duty. After it was over, my access was cut. My laptop screen went dark. My Slack icon turned gray. Just like that, 3 years of 8-hour shifts on my feet, of memorizing the orders of tech bro regulars, of cleaning mysterious liquids out of the bathroom, of being a key holder and an espresso artist, and a founding member of the Aura family, all of it was erased in less time than it takes to pull a decent shot. It's funny, the things you think about. I thought about the training manual, the one that said our customers weren't customers, they were investors in the Aura mission. I thought about my own investment. I thought about how much of myself I had poured into that place. And then I saw it. The CEO, Julian Vance, had posted a new video on Instagram. Julian, with his perfectly curated stubble, and his linen shirts that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, he was standing in what looked like a sun-drenched coffee plantation in Costa Rica, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves behind him. He smiled, a wide, predatory smile, full of teeth whitened by the profits of our labor. He talked about his recent trip, about connecting with the roots of our family tree, and then he looked right into the camera, his eyes gleaming with a kind of smug sincerity that can only be purchased, never earned. He said, "We're not like other companies. At Aura, we're a family. We support each other, we grow together, and we don't let outside distractions break our bond." My phone felt cold in my hand. Outside distractions. That was me. I was the distraction. The supportive family had just thrown one of its own out into the street for asking for a real seat at the dinner table, and that's when the heat started. It was a quiet heat, a low hum that started in my chest and spread through my veins. It wasn't rage. Rage is loud and messy. This was something else. It was cold. It was clear. It was the feeling of a machine locking into place, of a circuit finally being completed. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd cut out the tumor, and that the body would heal. He didn't understand. I wasn't the disease. I was a symptom. And the disease was him. The disease was the whole rotten, hypocritical, self-congratulatory lie he'd built. So I did what any grieving family member would do. I decided to deliver a eulogy for the company I thought I worked for, and for the family that never really existed. I opened TikTok. I typed out a title for a new series, Things My Corporate Coffee Family Did. Episode 1 was already storyboarded in my head. It was about the gas leak. Episode 2, The Misplaced Tips. I hit record. And before you ask, let me know in the comments if you've ever been told you're part of a family at work, right before they did something a family would never do. It helps to know I'm not just screaming into the void here, because my story, I have a feeling it's not just my story. Let's get into it. The walk home from the cafe that day, my last day, felt like moving through water. The sounds of the city were muffled, distant. My keys felt heavy in my pocket, keys to a place I could no longer enter. The whole world had a strange desaturated quality, as if someone had turned down the color. I got to my apartment, a small third-floor walk-up that smelled faintly of my downstairs neighbor's cooking in old wood. I didn't turn on the lights. I just slid down the inside of the front door and sat on the floor in the semi-darkness, my bag slumped next to me. That's when it hit. Not the anger. Not yet. just the weight. The immense crushing weight of failure. My hands were shaking, a deep, bone-rattling tremor that I couldn't stop. I had poured everything into this, not just the job, but the idea of the union. It had started so small, just whispers in the back room between me and Leo, while we restocked oat milk. Leo was younger than me, barely 22, a film student trying to pay his tuition by making latte art. He had this raw, unpolished idealism that hadn't yet been sanded down by the world. He still believed in things like fairness and justice. I remember the conversation that started it all. It was after a particularly brutal Saturday shift. We were both exhausted, covered in a fine mist of espresso grounds and sticky syrup. A corporate memo had come down that morning, announcing a new line of single-origin beans, complete with a fawning profile of Julian Vance in a business magazine, celebrating his conscious capitalism. The article mentioned record profits. That same day, my paycheck was $3 short, because I'd forgotten to clock back in immediately after my 30-minute unpaid break. $3. It was nothing, and it was everything. I leaned against the stainless steel counter and said to Leo, more to myself than to him, he's talking about record profits, and they're docking my pay for being 60 seconds late. Leo stopped wiping down the steam wand. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a shared unspoken frustration. He said, my tips were light again this week. The new digital system, the one Julian promised would be more transparent, felt like a black hole where our gratuities went to die. We never saw a full itemized breakdown. We were just supposed to trust them. We're a family after all. That was the seed. From there it grew in the dark, in text chains and quiet conversations after our shifts. We brought in Maya, a morning barista, who was a single mom putting her kid through daycare. Then Ben, who worked the closing shift and was always talking about the unsafe walk to the bus stop late at night. We were a mismatched crew of tired, underpaid people, who had been sold a story about changing the world, one cup at a time, while our own worlds were shrinking, getting more precarious with every rent increase and every adjusted paycheck. My mind flashed back to the gas leak. It's the incident that became the stuff of legend, the kind of story you tell new hires to warn them what they're getting into. It was a Tuesday afternoon in winter. A sickeningly sweet chemical smell started seeping out from the back room. It wasn't the familiar comforting scent of roasting coffee. It was sharp, cloying, like rotten eggs mixed with gasoline. Customers started complaining. A few of them got up and left, rubbing their temples. Maya, who was pregnant at the time, said she felt dizzy. Her face was pale, almost green under the fluorescent lights of the prep station. I went straight to our manager, a guy named Kevin, who had the perpetually stressed-out look of someone in over their head. I told him, Kevin, something is seriously wrong. We need to shut down. We need to call the gas company. He waved me off, his eyes darting around the half-empty cafe. He said, it's probably just the new cleaning solution. Corporate sent it over. Stop being dramatic, Clara. We have a rush coming. Dramatic. The word hung in the air, thick and poisonous as the smell, but I pushed. This wasn't about drama. It was about the literal air we were breathing. I said, Maya is pregnant. She's feeling sick. We have a responsibility to our customers and to our staff. He finally made a call, not to the gas company, but to the regional manager, Todd. I could hear his side of the conversation, his voice high and stern. He kept saying, yes, I understand the numbers for the quarter. No, of course we don't want to close. He hung up the phone and looked at me, his face a mixture of fear and resentment. He said, Todd says to open the doors for ventilation and offer a 10% discount to anyone who stays. He said, closing the store on a weekday looks bad for the district's performance metrics. It was one of the most surreal moments of my life. We were standing in a potential bomb, and corporate's main concern was how it would look on a spreadsheet. Leo, who had been quietly stocking cups, caught my eye. He gave his head a tiny, almost imperceptible shake. He was scared. We all were. But it was his fear that solidified something in me. I was the key holder. I was technically in charge when Kevin was on his break. I walked over to the front door, flipped the sign to closed, and locked it. I turned to the remaining customers and said, folks, for your safety, we're closing immediately. Please evacuate the building. Then I looked at Kevin. My voice was level, dead calm. I said, call 911. Now, or I will. The fire department arrived in minutes. They didn't find a gas leak. They found a faulty valve on an old, poorly maintained water heater that was releasing carbon monoxide into the building. A silent, odorless killer, masked by the scent of a chemical spill. The fire captain, a man with a tired, kind face, pulled me aside. He said, "You did the right thing. Another hour of this, and we'd be dealing with a much different situation." He looked over at Maya, who was sitting on the curb, drinking a bottle of water someone had given her. He said, "You probably saved lives today. I never got a thank you from corporate. What I got was a formal write-up from Todd for insubordination and violating closing protocols." Kevin, who had tried to keep us working, received a commendation for handling a challenging situation with brand integrity. I remember sitting in the small windowless HR office with Todd, the write-up on the table between us. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just kept adjusting his tie and talking about the importance of the chain of command. He said, "Clara, you have to understand. We have processes for a reason. You can't just decide to shut down a multi-billion-dollar operation because you think you smell something." I looked at him, and all I could feel was a profound, weary pity. He had so thoroughly absorbed the corporate scripture that he was now defending a decision that could have killed us. He was a true believer. I signed the write-up. It felt like a confession to a crime I didn't commit. That was the moment my loyalty to Aura died. My loyalty to the people I worked with, however, had never been stronger. That was the night I created the encrypted group chat. The night the union went from an idea to a project. Sitting there on my apartment floor, the memory was so vivid it made my stomach ache. We had been so careful. We used code words. We met in secret at a dive bar 2 towns over. We researched labor laws. We talked to organizers from other industries. I spent hours on my laptops after my shifts, building a case, documenting every single violation. The misplaced tips were another rallying point. The digital system was a disaster. One week the entire store's tips would be down by 40%. The official reason was always some vague technical glitch, an API sync error, a server-side miscalculation. We'd get an email from payroll with a hollow apology and a promise that the issue was being escalated to our tech partners. But the full amount never reappeared. It was just gone, absorbed into the corporate ether. Leo was the one who found the proof. He was a bit of a tech whiz, and he'd been digging into the source code on the customer-facing payment tablet. He discovered a hidden line of code, a service fee that was being skimmed off the top of every single digital tip before it was routed to our payroll system. It was small, a fraction of a percent, but multiplied by thousands of transactions across hundreds of stores, it amounted to it was wage theft, plain and simple, laundered through an algorithm. He showed it to me on his phone, his hands trembling with excitement and fear. He whispered, "This is it, Clara. This is the smoking gun." And it was. That was the evidence we were going to build our union drive around. Proof of systemic calculated theft, hidden behind the smiling face of ethical capitalism. We had a plan. We were going to go public with it. On the same day we filed our petition with the National Labor Relations Board. We were going to expose the lie from the inside out. But someone talked. Or maybe corporate was just smarter than we gave them credit for. Maybe their surveillance was better. I still don't know who it was, or how they found out. All I know is that 2 days before our planned announcement, I got the email. Employment status update. They didn't fire Leo, or Maya, or any of the others. They were smarter than that. A mass firing would look like retaliation. Instead, they cut off the head. They isolated me, the organizer, the distraction. They made an example of me. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my reverie on the floor. It was a text from Leo. It just said, "I'm so sorry, Clara." I saw the video. That bastard. Another buzz. "Maya, don't listen to them. You were right. We're all thinking of you." Their messages were kind, but they also carried a note of fear. They were still inside. They were vulnerable. I stood up, my legs stiff. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights. The initial shock was starting to wear off, replaced by that cold, clear hum I'd felt earlier. I thought about the write-up for the gas leak. I thought about the stolen tips. I thought about Maya's pale face and Leo's terrified eyes. I thought about Julian Van standing on that beautiful plantation, calling us his family. They thought they could silence me by firing me. They thought they could scare the others into submission. They had made a classic mistake. They had underestimated their opponent, and they had given me the one thing I didn't have before: nothing left to lose. I pulled out my phone and went to Julian's Instagram page. I scrolled through the comments on his video. So inspiring, Julian. A true leader, proud to be part of the our affair. Most of the accounts were private, with zero posts, corporate bots, astroturf praise. It was all a performance, a carefully constructed illusion. And in that moment, I knew that a legal battle with the NLRB wasn't enough. That was their world, their game, played by their rules. A lawsuit might get me some back pay in a year or two, after a quiet settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. It wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't give the others a voice. It wouldn't expose the truth. No, the truth needed a different kind of stage. It needed a bigger audience. It needed to be told in a language everyone understood. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. My face was tough. My hands were steady. But for the first time all day, my hands were steady. It was time to build a new plan. A plan for a different kind of union. A union of one. The plan didn't come to me in a flash of inspiration. It crystallized slowly, out of the fog of despair and anger. For the first 24 hours, I did what anyone in my position would do. I cycled through rage, grief, and a paralyzing fear about how I was going to pay my rent next month. I ordered a pizza I couldn't afford, and watched bad television until my eyes burned. But my brain, the part of me that had been trained to organize, to strategize, to see the patterns in the chaos, was already working in the background. It was sorting through the wreckage, looking for usable parts. A lawsuit was the obvious path. The NLRB protects concerted activity, and firing an employee for union organizing is textbook illegal retaliation. I even had a consultation with a pro bono labor lawyer, whose number I'd gotten from a national union organizer. She was sharp, passionate, and told me I had a slam dunk case. But she also told me the truth about the process. It would take months, maybe years. Aura Coffee's high-priced legal team would drown us in paperwork, file endless appeals, and delay. And in the end, the best-case scenario was a settlement where I would get some money, and the company would get a slap on the wrist. They would sign a piece of paper promising not to do it again, and nothing would fundamentally change. It felt like trying to fight a forest fire with a squirt gun. It was a structural problem, and a legal solution felt like a personal one. It would vindicate me, Clara, but it wouldn't empower Leo, or Maya, or the thousands of other baristas working in similar conditions across the country. And then there was Julian's Instagram video. It kept playing in my head on a loop. The smugness, the hypocrisy, the sheer audacity of him co-opting the language of family and community to justify exploitation. He wasn't just a CEO, he was a storyteller. He had built a billion-dollar brand on a narrative. The sustainable farms, the happy baristas, the conscious consumerism. It was all a beautifully crafted story. And I realized, you can't fight a story with a lawsuit. You have to fight a story with a better story. A truer story. That was the key. The leverage I had wasn't legal, it was narrative. The company's greatest asset, its ethical brand identity, was also its greatest vulnerability. It was a glass house, and I had a pocket full of stones. The idea for the TikTok series, Things My Corporate Coffee Family Did, started as a joke, a bitter fantasy I played out in my head. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. TikTok's algorithm rewards authenticity and raw, emotional storytelling. It's a platform built for Davids to talk about Goliaths. A stuffy legal complaint would be ignored. A 60-second video of a real person telling a true, shocking story could go viral in an hour. This wasn't about revenge. I kept telling myself that, over and over. It wasn't about getting back at Julian or Todd. It was about taking back the narrative. It was about burning down the fake family story, so that something real could grow in its place. The first step was to build my arsenal. I couldn't just go online and rant. I needed receipts. I needed proof. My mind immediately went to Leo. He was the one with the smoking gun, the code that proved the tip theft. But he was also terrified. He had his film school tuition to think about. He couldn't afford to be the next head on the chopping block. I called him. He picked up on the first ring. His voice was a whisper. He said, "Clara, are you okay? What are you going to do?" I took a deep breath. I said, "I'm going to tell the truth, Leo. And I need your help." I could hear the fear in his silence. I laid out the plan for him, the TikTok series, the focus on telling our stories directly to the public. I told him I wouldn't use his name, that I would protect him, but I needed the evidence. I needed the screenshots of the code he'd found. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Clara, they will destroy you. They have teams of lawyers. They will say you're a disgruntled employee, that you're lying. They'll sue you for defamation." "I know," I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt. "But what's the alternative, Leo? We let them get away with it. We let them keep skimming our tips, and Maya's tips, and the tips of every new kid they hire. We let them tell the world they're a family, while they poison their own staff with carbon monoxide. Silence is what they want. It's how they win." I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. I knew I was asking him to take a huge risk. It's a strange thing, to ask someone to be brave on your behalf. It felt both necessary and deeply unfair. To his credit, he didn't say no, he just said, "Let me think about it." I need to think. That was more than I could have hoped for. While Leo wrestled with his conscience, I moved on to the next part of my plan: distribution. A TikTok video is just a drop in the ocean, unless you can get it in front of the right people. This is where my foresight, born from months of union research, came into play. I hadn't just been researching labor law, I'd been mapping the entire ecosystem of labor journalism and activism. I had a spreadsheet. Of course, I had a spreadsheet. It was color-coded and meticulously organized. It contained the names, email addresses, and Twitter handles of every major labor reporter in the city, every influential progressive journalist, every big-name activist who had ever tweeted in support of a strike or a boycott. I had cultivated this list, not for a public shaming campaign, but for our original union drive. I had planned to send out a coordinated press release. Now it would serve a different purpose. It would be my amplification network. I spent the next 2 days drafting emails. I didn't just send a blast, I customized each one. To the data-driven investigative reporter, I highlighted the evidence of wage theft. To the human interest columnist, I focused on the gas leak and Maya's story. To the fiery left-wing podcaster, I framed it as a textbook case of corporate hypocrisy and capitalist rot. I wrote them with a calm professional tone. I wasn't a hysterical disgruntled employee. I was a source. I was offering them a story, complete with a timeline, a list of potential interviewees, who I would approach for consent first, and a promise of forthcoming verifiable video evidence. I attached the write-up from the gas leak incident, a digital document they had foolishly emailed me a copy of, a receipt. I told them I was launching a TikTok series on Friday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. I gave them the date, the time, and my TikTok handle. I was creating an event. I was manufacturing a news cycle. It was the most audacious thing I had ever done. The strategy was twofold. First, the TikTok series would create the public-facing narrative, the emotional core of the story. It would be for the customers, the general public, the people who bought the Aura Coffee family myth. Second, the emails to the reporters would create the journalistic-facing narrative, the factual verifiable backbone. The reporters wouldn't just be reacting to a viral video, they would have been primed. They would have the context. They would see it not just as a piece of social media drama, but as a legitimate labor story. The two fronts would support each other, creating a feedback loop of public outrage and professional validation. On Thursday night, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Leo. It contained a single attachment, a screen-recorded video. It showed him navigating to the payment screen on the Aura Coffee tablet, opening up the developer tools, and highlighting the exact lines of code that diverted a percentage of our tips into a corporate service fee account. He had added annotations, explaining what each line of code did in plain English. It was clear, concise, and utterly damning. At the bottom of the message, he had written a single sentence: "They don't get to win. Not this time." My heart swelled with a feeling that was equal parts gratitude and fierce, protective loyalty. He had done it. He had taken the leap. I immediately wrote back, "Thank you, Leo. I will not let you down." His evidence became the centerpiece of the plan for episode 2. Episode 1 would be the emotional hook, the gas leak. It was visceral, a story of life and death. Episode 2 would be the logical follow-up, the theft. It was about money, a motive everyone understands. I stayed up all night editing the first video. I used my laptop's webcam. The lighting was bad, the sound was a little tinny. I didn't try to make it look slick or professional. I wanted it to feel raw, real. I told the story of the gas leak in a calm, even voice. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just laid out the facts. The smell, Maya's pale face, Kevin's panicked call to corporate, Todd's instructions to keep the store open for the sake of the quarterly numbers. I showed the formal write-up on screen, my name clearly visible next to the word insubordination. I ended the video by looking directly into the camera. I said, "My name is Clara. I worked for Aura Coffee for 3 years. They call themselves a family. This is how they treat their family members. This is episode 1 of things my corporate coffee family did. Tomorrow I'll tell you how they stole our tips." Then I scheduled the post for 9 a.m. I also scheduled the emails to the reporters to go out at 9:01 a.m. Everything was locked and loaded. I sat back in my chair, the first rays of dawn starting to filter through my window. I felt a strange sense of peace. For weeks, I had been operating in the shadows, fighting a secret war. Now the war was about to go public. It wasn't about revenge. It was a simple declarative statement of fact. It was about resetting the board. They had their story, a fiction polished by public relations firms and marketing departments. Now I had mine, and mine had the distinct advantage of being true. The silence of my apartment at 8:59 a.m. on Friday was absolute. It felt like the moment before a storm breaks, a heavy static-filled stillness. I sat on my couch, my laptop open, my phone in my hand, watching the clock on the screen tick over. 9 a.m. My scheduled post went live. 9:01 a.m. My scheduled emails deployed. A silent digital volley fired into the inboxes of the city's most influential media figures. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The video had 3 views, probably all from me. A knot of doubt tightened in my stomach. What if nobody cared? What if Leo had risked everything for nothing? What if this was all just a grand, foolish gesture, a scream into the digital void that would echo once and then fade away? Then my phone vibrated. A like. Then another. A comment appeared. "OMG. I go to this place all the time. This is horrifying." Another vibration. It was a Twitter notification. One of the labor reporters I'd emailed, a woman from a major online publication known for her sharp, incisive work, had quote tweeted my video. She'd simply written, "The story behind the ethical coffee brand you love. A former barista speaks out." Thread below. She had tagged Aura Coffee's corporate account. That was the spark. It was like throwing a match into a tinder-dry forest. The view count on the video started to jump, not by ones and twos, but by hundreds, then thousands. The comments poured in, a torrent of outrage, sympathy, and shared experience. This happened at my old job too. I knew there was something off about that place. Tagging at Aura Coffee, "You have some explaining to do." My phone began to vibrate so incessantly I had to put it on silent. It was a dizzying, terrifying, exhilarating wave of validation. It wasn't just me. People were listening. They were angry. They believed me. By noon the video had over 100,000 views. By 3 o'clock, it had hit 500,000. My little story, filmed on a cheap webcam in my dimly lit apartment, was now a public spectacle. The first sign of panic from inside the company came around 2 p.m. It was a screenshot sent to me from a burner account. I knew immediately it was from Maya. It was a message in the company-wide Slack channel from the head of PR, a woman named Jessica. Her profile picture was a professionally shot headshot, all bright eyes and forced competence. The message read, "Hi family. A video with some serious and unfounded allegations is circulating online. Please remember our social media policy. Do not engage. Do not comment. We are handling this internally, and will be releasing a formal statement shortly. Let's continue to focus on our mission. The corporate jargon was so predictable it was almost comforting. The use of the word family in that context felt like a parody. Underneath her message, the Slack channel was a chaotic mess of confused and anxious emojis. But then another message appeared, this one from the official account of Julian Vance. It was clearly written by a PR team, but it had his signature blend of condescension and faux spiritualism. Team, in every family there are moments of misunderstanding. We are a culture of open dialogue and radical transparency. The claims being made are a misrepresentation of a complex situation, and we are confident that our commitment to our partners speaks for itself. Let's not be distracted by negativity. Let's focus on light and growth. Light and growth. He was talking about a carbon monoxide leak as a misunderstanding. The sheer unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. His message backfired spectacularly. Someone, I don't know who, leaked a screenshot of his internal message to the same reporter who had first shared my video. She posted it side by side, with a screenshot of the formal write-up I had received. The caption was brutal. Aura Coffee CEO calls a carbon monoxide leak a misunderstanding, and preaches light and growth, after his company punished the employee who saved her colleagues' lives. #Aura Coffee. The hashtag started trending. The silent takeover I had envisioned was no longer silent. It was a roar. Aura Coffee's first official response came late that afternoon. They posted a statement on their Instagram page, a wall of text on a beige background, the color of bland corporate apology. It was a masterpiece of non-denial. It spoke of their unwavering commitment to team member safety and their robust internal reporting procedures. It didn't mention me by name. It didn't mention carbon monoxide. It just referred to a recent social media post and assured their community that they were conducting a full internal review. It was the equivalent of bringing a water pistol to a house fire. The comments section was a bloodbath. Thousands of people, now armed with the details from my video and the reporting that had followed, tore the statement to shreds. They asked about the write-up. They asked why they punished the whistleblower. They asked for specifics. All they got in return was silence. Late that night, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A message appeared a minute later. It was Todd, the regional manager. His voice was strained, stripped of its usual corporate confidence. "Clara, it's Todd. Listen, I think there's been a huge misunderstanding here. What you're doing it's causing a lot of damage to the brand, to a lot of good people who work here. I think we should talk. Julian is willing to have a conversation. Just call me back." The panic in his voice was the first real taste of victory. They weren't in control anymore. The narrative had slipped from their grasp, and they were scrambling to get it back. They thought they could have a conversation, pull me into a back room, and manage the problem. They still didn't get it. This wasn't a problem to be managed. It was a truth to be told. I didn't call him back. Instead, I put the finishing touches on episode 2, the one about the stolen tips, the one with Leo's damning evidence. I uploaded it and scheduled it to post at 9 a.m. the next morning. While they were busy trying to contain the fire from day 1, I was pouring gasoline on it for day 2. This was my new chain of command, my new closing protocol. I was the one setting the terms now. The silent takeover was complete. The noisy part was just beginning. The second video landed like a precision-guided bomb. If the first episode about the gas leak was a story of shocking negligence, the second was a story of calculated theft. People understand danger, but they feel betrayal when it comes to their money. It's personal. The video, titled Episode 2, The Misplaced Tips, was even more devastating than the first. I started by explaining the company's new transparent digital tipping system. Then I put Leo's screen-recorded video front and center. I narrated over it, my voice calm and clinical, explaining in the simplest terms how a hidden service fee was skimming money from every single digital tip. I did the math on screen. I showed how a tiny percentage, multiplied by thousands of transactions, added up to millions of dollars in stolen wages over a year. I ended the video with a simple question, looking directly into the camera. I said, Aura Coffee calls its baristas partners. If we are partners, Julian, where is our share of this service fee? The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. The story immediately jumped from the realm of social media outrage to mainstream news. The labor reporter who had championed my first video published a detailed exposé, citing my new video and confirming with anonymous sources, other baristas I had put her in touch with, that their tips had mysteriously dropped ever since the new system was implemented. By Saturday afternoon, Aura coffee wasn't just a trending topic, it was the lead story on several major news websites. The narrative was no longer disgruntled employee. It was ethical coffee chain accused of systemic wage theft. The power shift was palpable. It was no longer my word against theirs. It was my evidence against their silence. The client exodus began quietly at first. It started with comments on Aura's Instagram page, which they had foolishly left open. I was a daily customer. Just threw out my $40 bag of ethically sourced beans. What a joke. Then it became more organized. Local food bloggers and city guide accounts, who had once sung Aura's praises, began posting statements retracting their recommendations. A few even posted videos of themselves brewing coffee from a rival local brand. The boycott was real, and it was spreading. Maya texted me on Sunday morning. "It's a ghost town in here. We've done maybe 20% of our usual Sunday morning business. Kevin is losing his mind." The financial impact was hitting them, and it was hitting them hard and fast. This was a crisis their PR team couldn't spin. You can't spin empty cafes. This is when the desperate counter came. On Monday morning, I received a thick, menacing envelope via courier. It was from a law firm I recognized as one of the most expensive and aggressive corporate litigation firms in the country. It was a cease and desist letter. It was full of threatening legal language, accusing me of defamation, trade libel, and tortious interference. It demanded I immediately remove all videos, issue a public retraction and apology, and threatened a multi-million-dollar lawsuit if I failed to comply. A week ago, this letter would have terrified me into silence. But a week ago, I was alone. Now I wasn't. I forwarded a scanned copy of the letter to the pro bono labor lawyer I had spoken with. She called me back within the hour, and I could hear her smiling through the phone. She said, "Oh, this is beautiful, Clara. This is a gift." I asked her what she meant. She said, "This is a classic slap suit. A strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's a bullying tactic designed to intimidate and silence critics. But in this case, it's a huge mistake on their part." "Why?" I asked. "Because," she said, her voice full of energy, "you have the ultimate defense against a defamation claim, truth. And by sending this, they have just confirmed how seriously they are taking your allegations. They've escalated this from a PR problem to a legal battle, and we are on much firmer ground in a legal battle." She told me to do nothing, to not respond, to let them flail. She said she would handle it. That same afternoon, the reporter who had broken the story published a new article. The headline was "Aura Coffee Threatens Legal Action Against Whistleblower Barista." She had a copy of the letter. My lawyer had leaked it to her. The public reaction was even more furious. A multi-million-dollar corporation threatening to sue an unemployed barista for telling the truth. It was a PR nightmare of their own making. They looked like bullies, confirming every negative suspicion the public now had about them. The final, most pathetic move came on Tuesday. I got another call from Todd. I don't know why I answered. Morbid curiosity, I guess. His voice was completely different. The strained professionalism was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading tone. He said, "Clara, Julian wants to make this right. He wants to offer you a new position, Director of Partner Engagement. It's a corporate role, a significant salary increase. We can put this all behind us. We can work together to fix the culture. A promotion. The very thing I had once craved, the validation I had worked so hard for, was now being offered to me as a bribe. They weren't offering it because they valued me. They were offering it because they feared me. The power shift was complete. They were no longer trying to silence me. They were trying to buy me. It was a checkmate I hadn't even seen coming. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment. I could hear him breathing, waiting for my answer. I thought about what to say. I could have yelled. I could have gloated. But I remembered the advice of a wise old organizer I had spoken to months ago. She had told me never let them see your anger. Let them see your calm. It terrifies them more than anything. So I took a breath, and I spoke in a quiet, even voice. I said, Todd, is this position also available to Leo? And Maya, are you offering promotions to all the family members whose wages you stole? He stammered. Well, that's a separate issue. We're addressing those claims internally. I knew then that it was over. I said, the time for a conversation was when your employees were breathing carbon monoxide. The time for a conversation was when you were skimming our tips. This isn't a conversation anymore. And I hung up. I blocked his number. The power had not just shifted, it had been completely transferred. They had nothing left to offer me that I wanted. I had everything they had ever tried to take from me. My voice, my dignity, and the truth. The vindication didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It came in waves, a slow but steady tide turning in my favor. The final confrontation, as it were, wasn't with Julian or Todd in some dramatic boardroom showdown. It was something far more modern, and far more humiliating for them. A national morning news show invited me for an interview. It was a big deal. The kind of platform that could cement the narrative in the public consciousness for good. My lawyer advised me to do it. She said, "You're not an accuser anymore, Clara. You're a labor advocate." So I sat in my small apartment, a professional lighting kit and microphone, sent by the studio making my living room look like a command center. And I told my story to millions of people. I was calm. I was factual. I presented the evidence, the write-up, the screenshots of the code. I talked about the fear that keeps so many workers in unsafe or exploitative situations. I talked about the power of speaking up. Then the host, a woman with a reputation for being a tough but fair journalist, turned to the camera. She said, "We did reach out to Aura Coffee for a comment. Their CEO, Julian Vance, has decided to join us live." My heart stopped. I hadn't been prepared for this. It was a trap. An ambush. They were trying to catch me off guard, to reframe the narrative on live television. Julian's face appeared on the screen next to mine. He was in a studio, wearing a dark suit, his face caked in makeup. He looked tired and cornered. He started with his usual talking points, the corporate doublespeak about family and misunderstandings. But the host was relentless. She didn't let him get away with it. She asked him direct questions. "Mr. Vance, did you or did you not punish Clara for evacuating a store that was filling with carbon monoxide?" He tried to deflect. "Our internal processes are complex." She cut him off. "It's a yes or no question, sir," he stammered. "Did your new payment system result in a significant decrease in your employees' take-home tips?" He launched into a defense of their tech partners and API integrations. She held up a printout of Leo's annotated code. "This code, which you claim is a glitch, seems to have a very specific function, Mr. Vance.
It diverts money to a corporate account.
Is that not correct?" He blanched. He was drowning, and he knew it. He tried to pivot, to attack me. He said, "This is a coordinated smear campaign by a disgruntled former employee who was terminated for performance issues." And that's when I spoke for the first time since he'd come on. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the studio noise like a razor. I said, "Julian, my last performance review, signed by Todd, rated me as exceeding expectations in every category. I have a copy. Would you like the host to show it on screen?" It was the final blow. He had no response. He just sat there, his smug mask completely shattered, exposed as a liar on national television. The interview ended shortly after that. He had not only failed to discredit me, he had spectacularly discredited himself. That was the real confrontation. Not a shouting match, but a quiet, factual dismantling of his entire world. The news of his downfall came 2 weeks later. It wasn't a press release, it was a leak to a financial news outlet. The Aura Coffee board of directors, facing plummeting stock prices and a shareholder revolt, had mutually agreed to part ways with Julian Vance. He was gone. Todd was let go in the same quiet purge. The company, under new interim leadership, issued a full public apology. They announced they were scrapping the digital tipping system and would be dispersing back pay, with interest, to all affected employees. They invited a national union to begin organizing their stores. They didn't do it out of the goodness of their hearts. They did it because their brand was in tatters and their business was on the verge of collapse. They did it because we had forced them to. My own new reality was taking shape in the midst of their chaos. The TikTok series had evolved. It was no longer just my story, it had become a platform. I started featuring stories from other workers, in other industries, who had faced similar struggles. I taught them how to document, how to build a case, how to tell their own stories. I was getting so many submissions that I recruited Leo and Maya, who had both quit Aura Coffee shortly after Julian's TV disaster, to help me manage it. We formed a small nonprofit, a digital union hall of sorts, funded by small donations from our followers. My new office was the same small apartment, but it no longer felt like a place of isolation. It was a headquarters. The walls were covered in whiteboards, filled with story ideas and campaign strategies. My desk, once a symbol of my unemployment, was now the command center of a movement. One afternoon, Leo came into the room, holding up his phone. He was grinning from ear to ear. He showed me the screen. It was a news alert. The baristas at an Aura Coffee location in Chicago, a store we had been advising, had just voted overwhelmingly to unionize. It was the first in the company's history. It was real. It was happening. We hadn't just won a battle, we had started a chain reaction. I looked around my apartment, at the organized chaos, at Leo's hopeful face. This was my new throne. It wasn't a fancy corner office, or a title on a business card. It was a purpose. It was the profound, quiet satisfaction of building something new and better out of the ashes of something old and broken. It was never about the revenge. It was about this. The vindication. In the end, it's funny what you choose to keep. Out of all the documents, the screenshots, the angry emails, the one thing I framed was the original write-up for insubordination. It hangs on the wall of my apartment, right above my desk. It's a reminder that sometimes, being called insubordinate, is the highest compliment you can receive. It's a testament to the fact that their definitions of right and wrong had become so warped, so completely inverted, that doing the right thing was a punishable offense. My name is Clara, you know my story now. It started with a firing, with a feeling of being erased, but it ended with me, and so many others, finding our voices. We learned that a story, a true story, can be more powerful than a boardroom full of executives. We learned that family isn't a word you can just slap onto a brand. It's something you build, through trust, through respect, and through fighting for each other, when it matters most. And now, I want to talk to you. Yes, you. The person watching this right now. Maybe you're sitting at your desk, in a job that makes you feel small. Maybe you've been told to be a team player, while your own needs are ignored. Maybe you've seen something wrong, something unjust, and you've been told to stay quiet, to not rock the boat. My story is not unique. It's a story that plays out in thousands of workplaces every single day. The details might be different, it might not be a gas leak, or stolen tips, but the core feeling is the same. The feeling of being undervalued, of being silenced, of being told that your contribution doesn't matter. I'm here to tell you that it does. Your voice matters. Your dignity matters. The most dangerous thing you can do is believe the lie that you are powerless. You are not. Power isn't just something that's handed down from the top, it's something you can build from the ground up, with your colleagues, with your community. It starts with a conversation. It starts with a shared story. It starts with a simple radical act of refusing to be silent. So, if my story resonated with you, if it made you feel seen, I want you to do a few things. First, like this video. It tells the algorithm that this is a conversation worth having. Second, leave a comment below. Share a piece of your own story, if you feel comfortable, or just let me know that you're listening. Reading your comments, knowing I'm not alone in this, has been the fuel that kept me going. Third, share this video. Send it to a friend, a coworker, a family member. You never know who needs to hear this message today. And finally, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. We are building a community here, A place where our stories are our power. Join us. Because they can fire one of us. But they can't fire all of us. They can silence one voice, but they can't silence a chorus.